the shrouded annals of time, when the gods of yore reigned over the realm, the Slavic folk followed a peculiar custom, both mysterious and grim. They believed that the gods demanded sacrifice, and not just any, but of humankind. But this was no simple offering, for the Slavs had their own ways and their own rituals. It was said that the gods would bestow their blessings upon those who appeased them according to their desires. The custom endured through centuries of strife and conflict, until the Slavs finally bowed to the cross of Christ. But even then, the echoes of the old ways did linger still. In this video we shall reveal the true nature of the sacrifice and the significance of this ancient rite. But before we dive into this video, I'd like to notify you that I have recently written an article on the unitedhomesteads.com, which is a fantastic resource for those interested in homesteading, bushcraft, gardening, blacksmithing and animal husbandry, as well as herbalism and many other related subjects. If any of these topics sounds interesting to you and intriguing, I highly recommend checking out the website for additional articles and information. Over time, numerous accounts have documented instances of human sacrifice within the pre-Christian European tribes. While some of these accounts originate from Greco-Roman sources that aimed to depict these tribes in an unfavorable light, others come from later Christian sources that held similar intentions based on religious motivations. As a result, it may be best to discount many of these sources entirely or view them with skepticism. The Christian sources on human sacrifice among the Slavic people often contain false descriptions, including claims that they sacrificed their own children. However, there are also reliable sources on the topic, which can be cross-referenced with later practices after Christianity was established. In Slavic languages, the word for sacrificed is typically derived from the root treb or treba, meaning need or necessity in reference to what the gods require. Places of sacrifice were called trebišta or trebeništa, and many modern place names are derived from these roots, suggesting that they were once sacrificial places. The breviary used in Slavic Orthodox Christian churches is still called trebnik, from this root. Another term used for sacrifice is žrtva, which gave rise to the word žrec, meaning pagan priest or sacrificer. Despite the Christian bias in many accounts, accurate sources of human sacrifice do exist. For example, in his Chronica Slavorum, Helmold of Bozau notes, "Then the priest announces, according to the casting of lots, which ceremonies are to be dedicated to the gods. Men and women gather with children and sacrifice their offerings of cattle and sheep to their gods, and many also with the blood of Christian men, which they boast delights their gods. After the sacrifice is made, the priest pours out a libation of blood for a more effective divination. For many believe that the demons are more easily summoned by blood. Once the sacrifices are completed according to custom, the people turn to feasting and rejoicing." A little further on, speaking of the god Sventovit, Helmold tells us that among the various deities worshipped by the Slavs, Svantevit, the god of the land of the Rugians, is the most powerful in providing answers, at whose sight they esteemed the rest almost as demigods. As a result, they used to dedicate an annual offering to him, selecting a Christian man by lot, and they would collect the required sacrifices from all the Slavonic provinces. Similarly, the practice of human sacrifice was also present among the Rus, but there is no evidence to confirm the existence of pagan temples in Russia, nor any indication of a dedicated priestly caste. Instead, idols were frequently placed on elevated locations, and it is reported that even humans were offered as sacrifices to them. According to the primary chronicle, Vladimir returned to Kiev and together with his people made sacrifice to the idols. The elders and the boyars then proposed that they should cast lots for a youth and a maiden and sacrifice to the gods whomsoever the lot should fall upon. Now there was a certain Varangian whose house was situated by the spot where now stands the Church of the Holy Virgin, which Vladimir built. This Varangian had emigrated from Greece. He adhered to the Christian faith, and he had a son, fair in face and in heart, on whom, through the devil's hatred, the lot fell. Messengers thus came and said to the father, "Since the lot has fallen upon your son, the gods have claimed him as their own. Let us therefore make sacrifice to the gods." But the Varangian replied, "These are not gods, but only idols of wood. Today it is, and tomorrow it will rot away. These gods do not eat or drink or speak. They are fashioned by hand out of wood. But the God whom the Greeks serve and worship is one. It is He who has made heaven and earth, the stars, the moon, the sun, and mankind, and has granted him life upon earth. But what have these gods created? They are themselves manufactured. I will not give up my son to devils." So the messengers went back and reported to the people. The latter took up arms, marched against the Varangian and his son, and on breaking down the stockade about his house, found him standing with his son upon the porch. They then called upon him to surrender his son, that they might offer him to the gods. But he replied, "If they be gods, they will send one of their numbers to take my son. What need have you of him?" They straightway raised a shout and broke up the structure under them. Thus the people killed them, and no one knows where they were buried. A few years before the writing of the primary chronicle, in a letter from 1808 by the Magdeburg Bishop Adelgot, among the images of Slavic crimes and atrocities contained in the document was a description of the worship of a god named Pripegala, whose name has been reconstructed as Pribiglov, meaning the one who, as a sacrificial gift, receives the head of executed enemies. The letter notes, "The most fanatical of them say, whenever they wish to divert themselves at feasts, 'Our Pripegala,' they yell ferociously, 'wants heads, therefore we must perform sacrifices.' Pripegala, as they call him, is a lewd, Priapus and Belphegor. Thus, after slaughtering the Christians before the altars of their idolatry, they fill the basins with human blood and, howling with terrifying shrieks, say, 'Let us make this day of joy. Christ has been vanquished, the victorious Pripegala has triumphed.'" A century earlier, Adam of Bremen describes the death and martyrdom of Bishop John during a Slavic revolt against Christianity. The elderly Bishop John, captured with other Christians in the city of Mecklenburg, was kept alive to be exhibited in triumph, and consequently lashed with whips for having confessed to Christ. He was then paraded in each of the cities of the Slavs to be mocked, as he could not be forced to renounce the name of Christ. His hands and feet were cut off, and his body was thrown in the street, but not before removing his head, which the pagans struck on a pike and offered to their god Radogost as proof of victory. These events occurred in Retra, the capital of the Slavs, the fourth day before the Ides of November. As we have seen in the aforementioned examples of human sacrifice among the Slavic people, the victims of these sacrifices were typically Christians, that is to say, members of a foreign and oppressive religion, and their heads were offered to the gods. Surprisingly, this practice persisted among certain Slavic communities even after the introduction of Christianity into the region. However, in these later instances, the victims were no longer Christians, but rather individuals who practiced other foreign religions. During the winter of 1282-1283, Serbia was invaded by the Byzantines, who were supported by the Tatars. A group of Tatars broke away and headed north towards the river Drim with the intention of pillaging. The people of the region gathered on the opposite bank of the river in a defensive position. The Tatars entered the river on horseback, but according to Archbishop Danilo, a miracle occurred. The river suddenly swelled, drowning many of the attackers, and those who managed to reach the shore were repelled by the Serbian peasants. The Serbian defenders captured their leader, Chernoglav, and beheaded him. They then placed his head, adorned with precious pearls, on a spear and presented it as a gift to their king Milutin. The entire process of the Serbian peasants in dealing with the Tatar chieftain has a ceremonial feel to it, likely due to the fact that they were not a professional army. They severed his head, placed it on a spear, and presented it to their ruler as a gift. This ritual of impaling the enemy's head on a spear and offering it as a gift to the leader was clearly an ancient tradition which Archbishop Danilo himself describes as primitive and practiced by the common people. It was a pagan custom, and during the 13th century it could only be performed on non-Christians, as it was not customary to execute captured Christians. The custom of presenting a spear-mounted head of a non-Christian enemy leader as a gift to the ruler among the Christian Serbs in the 13th century was a continuation of an ancient pagan practice of dedicating a similar trophy to their tribal god. The tribal god was likely denoted by the epithet Chernoglav, which means black-headed, among the Serbs and Baltic Slavs, and the trophy head by the name Chernoglavlje, meaning blackhead's head. The tradition about the Tatar invasion drew the conclusion that the executed Tatar was called Chernoglav, or black-headed, as the original meaning of the name was not understood in the 13th century. And indeed, Chernoglav, that is black-headed, has been attested as a deity in the Knitlinga saga, which states, "The fifth god was called Pizamar, from a place called Jasmund, and was destroyed by fire." There was also Chernoglav, their god of victory, who went with them on military campaigns. He had a mustache of silver and resisted longer than the others, but they managed to get him 3 years later. Altogether, they christened 5,000 on this expedition. It appears that Chernoglav, as mentioned in the Knitlinga saga, is another name for the deity Chernobog, meaning black god, whom Helmold associates with the devil. If this is true, and we already know that Chernobog is associated with Veles, it raises the possibility of other traits and qualities that can be attributed to Veles. However, this would require further analysis and additional evidence. The custom of collecting the heads of enemies as trophies was so deeply ingrained in the Serbian culture that it persisted well into the 19th century. A monument of this custom was erected in 1833 by Petar II Petrović Njegoš on a hill above the Cetinje monastery, where until 1850 severed heads of Turkish commanders were displayed, mounted on wooden poles as war trophies. There are even accounts from Montenegro of men competing to see who had decapitated more Ottoman heads, but in 1876 King Nicholas I ordered that this practice should end, because the European diplomats considered it to be barbaric. Serbian epic poetry contains numerous examples of this tradition, such as, "He cut off the commander's head, he mounted it on a fir branch. Upon it fell a black raven bird. May Ibar be forever black." The root of this tradition dates back to prehistoric times, when the head was believed to hold the very essence of a person, including their spirit, soul, and wisdom. It was a secret symbol of ancestral power in many cultures, including pre-Christian Europe. The leader of an enemy was seen as the embodiment of their tribe or community, so offering the head of the enemy leader to a god was a way of offering their essence and power to the deity, as well as acknowledging the superiority of that god over the defeated enemy. The Slavic language bears witness to this with words like glavar, meaning ruler or chief, but literally translating to head. Even in the English language, the term head is used to represent positions of power, such as head of state or head of the household. In some cases, the act of decapitation itself was seen as a way of severing the enemy's connection with their own deity or spiritual power, rendering them powerless in both this world and the afterlife. Moreover, by displaying the decapitated head, the victorious tribe or army was also sending a powerful message to their enemies, as well as to their own people, of their own strength, courage and loyalty to their gods. The practice may seem barbaric to some, but to those who understood its symbolism in the past, it was a potent act of spiritual and cultural significance. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the ancient traditions of the Slavic people. As we have seen, the practice of human sacrifice was deeply rooted in their culture and beliefs, with decapitation playing a significant role in these rituals. Through this exploration, you've hopefully gained a better understanding of the symbolism and significance behind these practices. I hope you found this video both true to the historical record and appealing in its presentation. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel for more videos like this. And if you want to dive deeper into Slavic paganism, be sure to check out my books, which are available on Amazon.